do when one is struggling and one is well? And that was phrased in a myriad of different ways. Partly the physical issues of just sickness. Some of that was very much a spiritual sense of somebody's really switching off and dialing down to faith and not doing well on the inner world portion of their life, but playing a bit of a game for the public persona. But behind closed doors, there's not a match there, not an ease of spiritual connectivity. And then there were some really serious conversations about where on earth are we going to go to church, and we're just not in agreement here, and it's actually not just a hidden thing, but it's a deeply ripping us apart thing. And then we obviously have the infidelity issues. Now, Ali and Louise, so that you know who you have got in front of you here, are experts, and I do mean literally experts, have done years of training within the deeper healing world with the Emmanuel program.
Approach.
And whenever I have somebody who's very broken and struggling, these are the two ladies that I pick up the phone to and say, I'm going to refer you to, Ali or Louise. Nigel and David, obviously, we have as couples been in church leadership for many years and sat on the other end of an awful lot of this, what feels like a mismatched crisis. This is a little bit different from the episode that we did in managing conflict, how to conflict well, but this is top tips and approaches to what will happen frequently where one seems to be doing better than the other. And I think the sense of it is, having all of us lived that in our, Ali, obviously your husband's not here, but he's at work, but married 10 years to gorgeous human Taylor. And all of these marriages here will have hit that, where it felt like one was winning and one was not, whether that was career or sickness or whatever. And we'll come to that. And so there is the sense of the angry end of it. I'm fed up being lied to my face. I'm offended by who you are and what you're doing, or I am stuck in unforgiveness, and that kind of, to the, oh my goodness, what do I do? You are broken, and there's a physical issue that is going on here. And so we want to sit in that together. And perhaps when it is mental health that needs time to improve, or sickness that needs time to improve, we are here to share, well, tea and sympathy with the journey, because there are some things that literally just take physical time for physical healing. So there we go. Who wants to kick us off? Will we start with personal stories this time, rather than accidentally looking supercilious and like we have all of the answers, but none of the experience?
Yeah, we could do.
We could do that.
Yes. Okay.
It is in the notes.
I'll. Okay.
It's not like you didn't know this.
No. That's very true. I'm just thinking. One experience for us, this was a time when I was struggling, and what was most important to me and what I needed then. And every time you struggle, and there's one struggling and one seemingly not, there are such great learns. But this was, my dad had just passed away quite suddenly, and he was very young when he passed away. And within a couple of months, we had made the fairly major life decision, and that was to move country. So within 8 months of his death and extrapolating life out, we were back resident in Ireland. And I suddenly found you had started a new job. You were he was very busy, and I was in new home. Settling children in new schools, new country. My mum was grieving my dad. I was grieving my dad. There was just a lot of stress situations, put a lot of them together. And it took me a while to realize I wasn't coping. And I definitely was struggling. Now, we all have a different response to struggling. Yes. Because when I'm struggling, I don't go, I'm struggling, I'm sitting down in this and I'm going to moan about it or whatever. Yeah. I'm a fighter. So I was fighting the struggle. But what made the big difference there was, again, what we've talked about, communication. And I remember Nigel saying to me one time, you just need to go to the doctor.
Yeah.
And that was a real shock to me. I was quite an offence because I thought a bit more loving might sort the issue or whatever.
Yeah.
And actually, I went to the doctor and I ended up for 3 months on antidepressants and went to see a counsellor. But action is the best thing we can do in a marriage when one is struggling and maybe the other isn't, is support, communication, bearing with, getting to the root of something, and not sitting there, as fast as possible, taking action. And this is where I do think that as best we can, we must take responsibility for our portion. So if we cannot give, so if the marriage is here and we're here, if I can't give 100% for some reason, and in that time I couldn't, in a sense, he needs to know, because for a phase or for a time, he needs to take up a slack.
He's bearing weight that is greater than normal weight.
Exactly.
Yes.
And that needs to be understood and agreed. Because if we can say, look, for the next 4 weeks, we won't talk about it again for 4 weeks, but I'm going to be taking 75% of the pull on certain things to leave you time to whatever with your 25%. It's an agreement. Then you don't get resentment, etc., etc. And I'm glad to say, after a very short period of time, because I took action, I went on medication and I went to counselling. So I dealt with some issues and very quickly was back to par and able to play my part. But that was a time in struggle. I was not doing well. You were doing grand because you were living your best life. And
what did that look like for you on the other side of that? Because everybody's response is different. When you're watching your most favourite person in the world not do well.
If I'm brutally honest, I was fairly oblivious to it.
Oh, okay.
I can't emphasize enough that the challenges,
lots of change.
We had come back to Ireland, which was really part of a dream of certainly mine, maybe ours.
I did have to, can I just cut across here? I did have to shout fairly loud.
Okay.
Say, I am not coping, because he was in a different mental space.
And you would recommend that rather than shouting in the kind of a scattergunned approach, there was I am struggling specifically here.
And this is if we learn communication techniques and communicate well before there's a problem. Communicate when things are going well. So when things aren't going well, or you're having a personal struggle, instead of you're not giving me enough attention and you're not helping enough around the house or whatever, it can be, I am feeling X, Y, and Z. I am. And then we can actually get the issue out onto the table.
So you said you were oblivious.
A little bit
oblivious, yeah, because we were back in Ireland, having spent 12 years in the UK. So that was a big deal. I had stepped into, it was my second ministry situation, but it was a really very clearly defined one. And it was all new, totally new. Whereas the previous ministry, I had progressed within the church we'd been in into a full-time position in it. But this is completely new. And actually, it's a denominational environment that I wasn't used to. There's so many things going on. Our kids are adapting to school and everything. I was oblivious to it. And I would say I wasn't alert. And probably Louise wasn't brilliant on communicating it either.
Yeah.
Because
I wanted him to recognise and to help.
Come and rescue. I want to be seen. I want to be rescued.
Which again is a classic fail in a marriage, because that's not good communication, having an expectation without actually saying
it's quite a brave place to be able to say, I am struggling.
It is, yeah. And I look back now and we can analyse and assess those situations. But at the time, it didn't seem like that. And even as we talked about it afterwards, it didn't seem like that for a long time. It felt like I don't really remember you like that at all.
Yeah, because you were so busy, so busy. But just on a positive note, men are good at with solutions. And when it did come to the crux, and he just turned around with partly the solution. You need to go to the doctor. And he was absolutely right. I wouldn't have got there by myself because I didn't recognize, having never been, quote, depressed before. I mean, it was a reactive depression. I didn't recognize it, but he was able to say, you need to go to the doctor. And I'm thankful for that. Even though that might have been the first bit of help I got, at least it was a solution and we were on our way. Yeah.
That's good. Yeah, I've been through a couple of different things. One is when I came out of my last place of worship, like I was basically in burnout. And I remember I was in a place where I couldn't sleep. I had lots and lots of intrusive thoughts that were literally keeping me awake at night. And I had turned to taking some pain medication that I had got for my back to try to help me to sleep, and then realised that was actually one of the worst things that I could do. And I remember Taylor in the middle of it, I actually think he called you, but I think he said, Ali's just not doing well. Can you help? And so that kind of idea of getting some level of external help, because he didn't know what to do with me, and I certainly didn't
Sometimes
know.
it's too charged, isn't it? Yes.
Yeah. And then just not even that long ago, we went through basically a year of Taylor being extremely depressed and just not himself, really struggling in work and just at the lowest end of life that I've ever seen him. And I think it lasted about a year. And me being on the other side of that. And again, we did the inner healing, we did CBT, all of the things that you can do that are external to your marriage. But both seasons, I think, are rough on both sides of the spectrum. But again, you come out of it the other side thinking, wow, I learned so much about myself, about my own ability to cope, and then about how God wants you to behave in a situation, about how they respond in a situation.
Yes.
And yeah.
The general sense of you do actually come out of the other end of it, but it feels like you will never. So David and I'll tell some of our stories. Both of us have had moments of extreme stress, antidepressants, depression. I had a major instant, very differently wired, and we'll tell our story and how we navigated it. So before we were married quite a long time ago, I'd had a series of surgeries, and I had died on the operating table and had miraculously been brought back to life. They were calling my time of death, and suddenly I was alive, when they were literally writing down the time of death. And what should have been a great miracle so rattled my entire system. And how long was it after that we got married? It was under a year we were married after that moment.
Yes, we were engaged at the time.
Yeah.
And you were a young woman, should have been in your prime.
Should have been ruling and reigning.
But it affected
everything.
Yeah.
So gave up my graduate fast track because I couldn't really do that. We ended up in London, in a job that I was ill suited for because it was what I could get, and just processing the loss and deep grief and the loss of where we'd lived in York, the newness of London, jobs that neither of us particularly loved, and my whole system disintegrating under the trauma of the surgery and the physical implications, because it took me, they give me the wrong blood and a blood transfusion at one point in all of it, and really quite serious ongoing issues that then stayed with me for years because I had antibodies in my blood that then attacked my unborn children and meant every pregnancy I had was quite traumatic. And they were all C-sections quite early. So, but at that point, what should have been the most joyous first year of married life was horrendously difficult. Now, I was aware I wasn't coping, but to be truthful, when you are aware, your linguistic capability to communicate is severely hampered. So you don't actually know how to say, I am not well. And actually, if you can say, like you were, like this conversation here, I'm not well, I'm not coping, go to the doctor. That's actually...
It's not bad. It's pretty
That's
good.
not bad going.
Yeah.
I don't think I even knew how to... I was too young. I was 22 years old.
We wouldn't have had even our language of what both our church experiences would not have had a language of go to the doctor for mental health issues. That wouldn't have been
no
something.
idea. I mean, just no idea at all. But we knew something was off. So I suppose my question is in all of that, and eventually, because I'm in the doctor all the time at this point, and then there's antidepressant therapy, and I'm going, this is a sin, because I was raised in a culture that said to me that, you know, if you had mental health, if you needed antidepressants, then it must be a demon. So that was and I ended up working in pharmaceuticals and understanding that it was just that my serotonin flow wasn't right, you know, that it was as straightforward as a diabetic. I just didn't have coping hormones flowing through my system. So all of that. But my question in that is to you, what did that feel like and what did that look like? Because this should have been the best year of our lives, first year married, and here you are, and I can't even walk to the train station to get on a train to work because my body is such a mess.
Yeah, there's no doubt it was a tough time. I suppose I'd made the commitment, the covenant in a way, and we'd entered in having been through this in the run up to our marriage. So it wasn't like you had gone from, in our experience, you hadn't been
Mrs. Well.
fully well, and then suddenly this. So there was a kind of expectation there. But yeah, I guess there has to be the willingness to adjust pace a little bit. I do think there are times in marriage where one has to recognize, okay, I need to take more responsibility here. I need to step up here. If someone is struggling, whether that be in a spiritual way or a physical way or some other practical way, I need to pull a bit harder here, take the oars for a little bit here. But I've always been, because of various circumstances in my parents and even my grandparents, where at times of spiritual stress, they separated how they did spirituality. I've always been particularly resistant of that. So actually walking together through things has been very important, and not going too far down I'm just going to make my own career here and you know, leave the person behind.
You never let that happen.
Yeah.
You're very determined. I don't think you ever once said anything mean-spirited or critical or you could do better. And I was like that for a couple of years.
Yeah, I mean, I was completely naive and no idea what to do at a 22-year-old.
But you were kind. Yeah. And I think the model of his kindness and the contention for the fruit of the Spirit and the contention for that was actually a massive part of my journey into wellness. There was kindness always. And that comes at a great cost.
Yeah. And I think when one is struggling, the other one gets very much in touch with how much the marriage is about themselves rather than us or the other person.
Yeah.
Because when something is withdrawn, the person is not themselves, there isn't the same level of fun or togetherness or function.
Yeah.
And you have those feelings of, they're not, you know, you need to sort yourself out because I'm not getting the satisfaction out of this relationship. You realize how much selfishness or how much actually you are for the other person. And of course, we know the biblical model, which is to lay down our lives for one another, because in every marriage, there are going to be times, whether it's natural rhythms of life, like pregnancy, where everything changes, and when you've small babies and whatever, or the normal stresses of life, they are going to come and go. But you do find how much you are really invested for the marriage and for one another, or how much you're invested for yourself. I mean, this is the one thing about marriage. You really do find out an awful lot about yourself that you may not find out if you stay alone.
I suppose where that scripture is extrapolated into vows is for richer, for poorer, in
sickness and in health,
for better, for worse,
till
till
death
death
for worse.
Do us part.
Which we say because we know it's part of the vows, but I don't know how many of us really, I mean, we can maybe think about it, but we don't know when we're standing making those vows, the implication of what is possible.
The pain that is possible.
At the other side of those vows.
And if you've made something else an idol, like in the case of, like if I had made my career an idol above my marriage, then I would be really struggling, because there would be some limitation, or I would be like, well, I have to just let her figure her things out because I've got to pursue this thing. And I see it sadly, I see it in particular in ministry, that people make their ministry or their call an idolatry and actually leave some of the things that should have been is their first commitment before God. Your marriage is your first commitment before God. Your family is your first commitment. Now, that's not to say that you can't all go full out on ministry together as a family, but you don't leave them behind and abandon them.
Yeah, in the midst of all our stuff, it was funny because I kept like praying, obviously, Jesus, help, 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 help. But all Jesus would say to me is, be kind. And so I spent a year especially because we're wired so differently, like my response in crisis, I have two responses. I'm a fighter or I'm a flighter. So, but mostly my fight comes out first. So I'm like, I will not go down. And so then I'm in pursuit. Like, I've never been without a job. I've never, because I'll go and get a thing. Taylor is wired in the completely opposite way in the middle of trauma. And so I could very easily have stood in the midst of it and said, come on, pull yourself together. And every time I went to open my mouth, I heard Jesus, be kind. So here I am. And it was a hard year, but my kindness, like he now would say, like your kindness is really what got me through. Like you were so kind to me. And so, that is what I learned.
I suppose you're riffing off the scriptural thought of Jesus' loving kindness leads us, brings us, draws us to repentance. There's something of a movement that kindness produces, in that case, in that scripture, to a repentance. But it's certainly implying the movement that kindness can generate in another life.
Totally.
And a secondary question is, when Jesus says, be kind, the next question is, what does kindness look like in this situation? Because sometimes kindness is speaking the truth in love.
Yes,
but
you need to
kindness
go to the
is the value. Yes, kindness is the way in which you speak or you act. Kindness is not just being nice. So we do have to ask the questions of what
an
kindness looks like.
There are times in my life, I'm sure I can't think right now, but there will be, and you can maybe remind me, Emma, but where I have needed that intervention that was a kindness, but it's like, right, you're not getting off your backside to get this sorted. I am going to, I don't know, book whoever needs to come and speak to us or do that. I think that if you feel like, oh, I've got to be passive and wait for them to get on the page, you could be waiting a very long time. It is okay to take the initiative. It's in Ephesians 5, and I know that there are certain parts of this passage that are quoted by men. But actually, the important one to me is verse 28. Thus also husbands ought to love their own wives as their own bodies. The one who loves his own wife loves himself. For no one ever hated his own flesh, but nourishes and cherishes it, just as Christ does the church. And so it's that sense of loving your own wife as your own body. If you had injured your knee, you're not going to say, well, I've booked in that I'm going to play football, so knee, you're coming along and I'm just going to run on it and wreck it. No, okay, I need to invest in this knee to get it well again, to get it healed again, and then we can do it. So what do I need to do? Totally. And likewise, if a partner is struggling in something, I'm going to take the time out for that.
I think that one of the major learns, and then over to you, Nigel, one of the major learns that we developed through, first of all, what I was going through with the surgery and all of the battles I had after that, was then some years later, you know, very happy, healthy, well years, and then some years later, it was your turn. And when people are failing or frail, certainly within my church or within my staff team, my general phraseology is, oh, it's your turn. In other words, it's minimizing the alarm of I am the only basket case who has this kind of thing.
I've heard you say it so many times.
Heard me, well, it's just your turn. Yeah. And actually, your honesty makes me like you more. Your honesty enables me to promote you more because it's your turn. So it was your turn. And again, physical. Do you want? You can tell the story. Just physical.
Sure. Yeah. I come after a couple of years or 2 years of very hard work, where we were running 3 ministries at the time, and I was also working as a consultant, and that was taking me abroad. I was flying across to Ireland on a weekly basis at least, and staying away a couple of days. The first year of that was very much a God-ordained situation. He told me what to do. I did it, and the opportunity happened. The second year, the opportunity fell in my lap and I took it, and I hadn't prayed it through. It was a man's opportunity presented, same situation, but I took it, and that second year nearly broke me. Physically exhausted, not looked after myself. And so I came to the end of that year, caught an infection, got pneumonia, was in hospital in intensive care for a month, and all sorts of complications with that, with my heart, with my breathing, with my lungs, and so couldn't really physically move. After I got out of hospital, serious. I was in bed then for a couple of months after that, and some of you watching prayed during that time for us. Thank you. We really appreciate that. Supported us. So coming out the end of that, and then trying to get back into work and ministry, and finding that, I'm sitting in meetings, I have no idea what's going on. I can't remember conversations, just mentally in a wreck of a place.
I mean, I don't know whether you felt my kindness. I don't know that I did as well as you did in the kindness stakes.
But I actually feel you had it worse in many ways. I got to lie in bed and for a few months, and anyway, you had to run around.
I remember the sheer pain that I felt asking this question: will he ever come back? Will he ever come back? Because in protracted illness, I could not figure it out. And you're in crisis mode for so long, and you've got 3 children and ministry and this and that and growth and life and this success in ministry. But behind the scenes, it's like, oh my goodness, will he ever come back? And the level of heartache that caused, you will know this. Will they ever come back? And the sense of like, and then I'm thinking, I didn't know how to process it, and it felt selfish to ask for help from myself because he was the one who was really sick.
That's complicated.
It's a very complicated situation. I'm not coping with, and I'm on the phone to my support network, who quite honestly were no better than Job's friends, you know, and were telling me a load of nonsense, and you're going, are they right? I didn't know whether they were right or wrong. But actually what happened in that, I went in to David in the office. He'd come in for like an hour. And I remember saying to him, our advice has told us this. and something clicked and this warrior arose, and he's like, that is not true. That is not us. That is not we, and suddenly he came back. But I remember the pain of that. But what that has done, and here is the learn from this situation, is we now have like a shorthand, a little bit like you have a shorthand for physical intimacy, or you have shorthands.
Code words.
Code words.
And so now, and Dave and I live a very sort of high octane type life.
Yeah.
You're raising one eyebrow at me. Yeah. My dad's like, this is ridiculous. But there's a grace for it, and we run well like that. But there are moments in it where David will say this. He will say, I am not doing well today mentally. And he owns it, and he says it. And I have the same thing that I say, I am struggling today. And now that we have learned that, it is like action, go stations, because we understand what it's like if you don't action that. We've lived the pain of it. And so now it's like, right, fix, solve, action, you've admitted, and you got to learn those shorthands, and you've got to learn to take serious those codes, where when you say, I am struggling mentally, this is too much, and we're sitting on the end of a settee going, this is enough. And I'll often go, I can't answer another question. I can't hear another word. Whereas you'll be like, I'm struggling mentally. We have these things that we say, and it's quite dramatic.
We hope you were blessed by that clip. And if you want to watch the full episode, head to Power TV today at www.powertv.app. It's our new place where we host all of our content, including prophecy, live broadcasts, teachings, worksheets, and more. Join us as we reveal the voice of God to the nations through life-changing and life-giving words from God. See you there.